WWE over the weekend, we got more departures from the company, and we'll use the term departures because there's some specific descriptions here. So the big ones, of course, are Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, which, from our understanding, this was a case of the company wanting to restructure their contracts, and would seem these two were not exactly keen to that idea. And whatever the back and forth dialogue was between the company and the New Day, it resulted in them being granted their releases. So it's not a case of them being fired or cut, but more so this was, they're walking away here. But this seems to be the case of several of these potential contracts being restructured. We had PWInsider.com reporting today that a majorly pushed talent was asked to take a 50% pay cut and allegedly did. And they're not naming the talent. Sean Ross Sapp has added that a number of people were asked to take pay cuts. And then the final note on this is also the departures of JC Mateo, the former Jeff Cobb, and Tanga Loa. And obviously we can look at whether there are going to be any more. Like historically, there was always just the one big day where you get just a whole avalanche of cuts. And then for a while, these cuts went away, but they are back with a vengeance. Pretty much since, I would say, the pandemic, we have got these usually, sometimes several times per year. But this is a rather big one. We're almost at like 30 names that have exited the company over these last 10 days. So let's start with the New Day and just some of your thoughts here, and maybe just overall the idea of the company attempting to restructure contracts at this time. Like, this is not going to go over well with talent when you're looking from the outside in at all of the revenue that is being generated by this company. And if you are not meeting some expectations that you, the company, have set, I mean, it does show you here. Talent is one area that it is not a fixed expense. We can just change contracts or just cut people from their contracts, even though there's time left on them. And I would be furious if I was a talent being asked to restructure my deal.
I guess it begs the question, what are the expectations that are not being met?
Well, this year,
are they not making tremendous profit?
They are making extremely great profits. And at the beginning, for their guidance this year, they are predicting, or at least basically ensuring the street that they are going to make this certain level of EBITDA that is going to be record breaking. And, if you had a softer WrestleMania, I mean, that's a contributing factor. And if they feel they are somewhat off pace 4 months into the year, then it's, well, we did not bring in this revenue, so we are going to curb these expenses. And it is better for us to pay out some of these contracts for the next 90 days rather than the rest of the year. And that's one area that we can impact. Like that's one way to look at it. And I mean, if I was talent and I'm watching these shows and I'm seeing just all this found revenue that was not there before. Like, you've created all this income for yourself. We weren't getting money off of the canvas. We weren't getting all of this advertising, which, by the way, folks, these talents are not enjoying any of this. They don't get a cut of any of this advertising. They don't get a cut of any of these sponsorships. And I'm sure it is going to strike even harder this week when they have their earnings call on Wednesday night. And we just got the report of like the incentive packages and compensation packages for Mark Shapiro, for Ari Emanuel, for Nick Khan. And these guys are making like in the 9 figures in the case of Ari Emanuel. So, I mean, this is just not going to reach talent in any kind of sympathetic way. And I frankly don't think it should be. Like, this is talent that I would imagine many people would have the reaction of New Day. The question would be, are you in a financial position to walk away from a deal if they came to you with this option of cutting your contract by X percent?
Sure. Yeah. I think more than ever, we are seeing that this is a company that does not care about locker room morale, or at least on the surface. I don't think they care about it as much as they do shareholder morale, or just what their stock, looks like. What their budget sheet looks like. And I would say I don't think they care much about maybe the public perception, or at least as far as the people that are in the weeds enough to follow these sort of things. I don't sense they care enough to worry that much about it. I imagine somebody like a Mark Shapiro, other than maybe fielding that one question, I don't know if he ever really has to confront these sort of topics and these sort of discussions and these sort of issues. And so I feel like he just looks at numbers and says, chop this off and then get back to me.
It's glue, it's sticky, it's traction, it's high engagement.
And if you're Levesque, if you're, actually a member that faces the talent, faces the public, you kind of can pass the buck and say, hey, I'm only following orders. And well, really, what can he do about it, I suppose, is maybe what he would say. It's a terrible situation, but I feel it's almost, again, like the really sort of like cold, hard truth of what this company currently is. And that's just, it's just a money-making machine, not necessarily a, I don't know, family and friends machine.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions here, but this is a situation that this company has grown to such a degree that there were certainly times in wrestlers' histories where some kind of collective bargaining could have been achieved, and could that even be done today? I don't think it can. And at this point where we just reported that story of talent was getting in 2022 15% of revenue, and here we are, pumping out this Hulk Hogan documentary where Jesse Ventura's all over it, and here's a guy that just totally squashed this union initiative in 1986, and how many real attempts have there been since then? That was one option, and that is a part of Hulk Hogan's story on top of it. And today, it's here is the talent. And yes, a lot of these wrestlers, they're making more than they ever have, and that's going to be okay. But the leverage, it's very, very little. And yes, if you're a top guy, you will be taken care of, but nobody is expendable. And here it is, that in the state that this company is in, and the option is going to talent to restructure their contracts, not executives taking any kind of a haircut or changing that. It's the talent. It's the guys that are on the road that have to take this one, because they are the ones that have the least protective measures in place. And that is going to be a hallmark of UFC fighters, of WWE performers, and that's the reality, that this has made it attractive for TKOs to see that here is an unorganized mass of talent that we can control in a way that we never could in any kind of organized sport.
Their biggest point of leverage is AEW. Or in the case of maybe somebody with a burgeoning Hollywood career, maybe Hollywood, or in the case of Brock Lesnar, maybe at one point it might have been the UFC. But there aren't many people who have options like that. I mean,
these salaries would not be what they are without AEW. Any talent that is not grateful for these last 7 years of AEW's existence, you would see something much more comparable to a UFC and PFL, for instance. If TNA was the other North American competitor, it would be a greatly different landscape than that. Looking at this specific talent way, because AEW, as always in these situations, they sort of have the pick of the litter, and I think New Day has to shoot to the top of anyone's list. As Jack and I were talking about today, this really is the ball is in New Day's court. It is, what do these two individuals want to do? Because I think that door is going to be wide open. And I think that at least off the start, they'd be a big deal going into AEW.
No doubt. Absolutely. Yes. As far as free agents go, I would say they are probably higher profile than most that would become available. I do think you have to bring up the question though of, well, how much would you pay them? And the answer can't just be whatever they ask for, because if you're running AEW, you have to run it as a business, and you have to worry about your own margins, and you have to worry about the amount of people and the amount of contracts that you're signing on. Because for every, I know Tony Khan has a lot of money, sure, but ultimately he does want to run a profit-making company. And if it means signing the New Day versus signing a crop of, talents who have never been in the WWE before that might someday be your next Hangman Pages or MJFs? That is a question you do have to ask.
Do you see them making a strong play for a lot of these names like New Day, Motor City Machine Guns? These are all going to be names that everyone is looking at. And traditionally, when we go through these, Wade, like by and large, like AEW, they are more aggressive than they are cautious when it comes to going after talents that are available. And there's good and bad to that. I don't think you want to necessarily just be always just going after these talent. Like there has to be a role for them. There has to be. Everyone knows the first week is going to be that big pop, that big surprise. But it's where are they week 8? Where are they week 10? And I think New Day, obviously, it writes itself. They can come in. There's a lot you can do with them. I think these two would be exceptionally motivated to come in and do something like something that goes beyond what they did this past year, where I would imagine there was a lot of frustration on their part of the heel turn that was just, I think it was a disaster for them. I think like beyond the turn itself, I just think these guys, there was no concrete plan. There was nothing that, like, these guys were less important than ever over this last year. But I think all that will be shed the second they show up in AEW, and they'll be taken to as a big deal. And at least you have like a lot of interesting scenarios for them.
Yeah, I would definitely say yes on the New Day. Again, provided like, and I feel like, there's probably enough for them to do beyond the wrestling that would justify, probably maybe like certainly an above average salary, like just, I think as their singles runs alone makes them incredibly valuable. Kofi Kingston is responsible for Kofi Mania. And that alone, I think like, that is an aspect that for whatever reason has been so underplayed throughout the rest of his WWE career since that happened, that I just don't know why they didn't try to make more money, but just off of that. But obviously as a tag team, they're incredibly successful and have a great chemistry with each other. But you got Xavier Woods, who I think is maybe the most prominent professional wrestler in the video game space, who, I don't know exactly how much like AEW is doing with like the whole gaming side of things, after maybe what you might consider the lack of success of the video game. But nonetheless, like he offers a sort of like, foot in that door, much like Kenny Omega, that can perhaps, create a new line or at least like more money coming in other ways. So yes, 100% yes for them. I would say yes to the Machine Guns simply because I think they are so much of like the same style and connection as just the established, tag team division that's already there.
We'll need a new name for one Kofi Kingston.
Yes, he would. I mean, he could still be Kofi, I believe. Is that not something he might have had before?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what
Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston. His real name is Kofi, actually.
Well, he can go by Kofi.
Yeah, that's all he needs.
That's all he needs.
Yeah.
Yes. So the more interesting one here, Jeff Cobb was someone that was on AEW's radar. He did some spots on Dynamite in some of their earlier days, but like this guy's turning 44 in the summer, and like this, it is not like I totally understand both him and Tanga Loa like getting that WWE call later in their careers. They're coming in for a bloodline adjacent story. I don't think there's many performers who would not have been taking that shot, especially at Cobb's stage, to make some good money. It didn't work out, and he's coming off of a very inadequate year in WWE. I would not be as hot on these two in AEW. I'm curious, like, what New Japan's like interest necessarily is. What are these guys like hopes to do? Like, it's one thing for a lot of these guys that they're used to the grind of going to Japan every so often, doing that trip, and it's just Groundhog Day. When you get off that hamster wheel and then it's like it's going back to this after a year of WWE money, I'm definitely curious as to where these guys end up. I won't be stunned if a Cobb does get a look at AEW, but these are the kinds of decisions where it's like you've got your pick of a lot of people, and quite frankly, do they have a role for Jeff Cobb beyond Don Callis family number 17?
I personally don't think so. Not at his age, and not when he had the option and turned it down. I don't think his WWE run did him any favors. It really, I think, devalued both of these guys greatly, and I don't think there's audience demand for it. I mean, but it's up to him to build that back up, either through the indies or honestly wherever he can maybe get some exposure, because there is an incredible wrestler within there, this JC Mateo, and he has to show it, and he has to, I think, earn a bit more cachet with the audience in order to maybe drive that demand up there to get to people that actually want to see him on a bigger stage, I think.
So those are the names that we had out of
and Tanga Loa, honestly, I would stay away from altogether, no matter what promotion you are. Like, okay, these guys weren't necessarily given the best roles within the MFTs, but they did absolutely zero to try to overcome it in any of their performances. In the case of Tanga Loa, I think more often than not, he's just become more of a joke, than anybody who you would consider impressive in any sort of way. So I don't have such sympathy for that. But again, it's up to them to be able to change people's opinions, and they have to work hard to do that, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, this does give you a sense of you more than anyone have spoken about this SmackDown tag division. And it's that's where a lot of these cuts ended up. And you look at some of the names that are still there. And at best, you have to be looking at being on eggshells at that point of, as you're getting older and you look at some of the performers that are there.
If you're making a lot of money but not seeing a lot of airtime, of course, yes, you should be concerned. Yeah.
So we will continue to follow this, but typically these names, they're expected to have 90-day no-compete clauses. So this would line up to late July that they would be looking to be free to go elsewhere if that is as all these contracts typically are structured. If the Post Wrestling Cafe were to undergo a drug test in the month of May, we would be testing positive because we are overloaded with content. We are going to be reviewing Hulk Hogan, Real American, all 4 episodes this month. Plus, we will go inside the Manosphere with a review of the latest Louis Theroux documentary. We will also have coverage of the Ronda Rousey-Gina Carano fight, also taking place on Netflix. Rewind Away tackles WCW Super Brawl 2, and we cover NXT TakeOver Brooklyn from 2015. All that, plus all of the XL editions on a weekly basis, Collision Course, Daredevil Born Again, and so much more. It can all be yours at postwrestlingcafe.com. $8 gets you in the door.